Okay, it's 12:30, so we might start. Just as a reminder, as I said earlier, if you have a mobile phone, can you please turn it onto silent? My name is Ally Roche, and I'm a curator here at the War Memorial in Photographs, Film and Sound. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the original custodians on the land on which we meet today, the Ngunnawal people, and pay respects to elders past and present, and welcome all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today. Gary Ramage is a triple Walkley award-winning photographer and photojournalist, and is currently chief photographer with News Corp, covering Australian federal politics. Prior to this, Gary spent 20 years as a military photographer, incorporating the role of unit photographer as an infantryman with 6th Royal Australian Regiment, 6 RAR, through to the Australian Army Chief Defence Public Relations photographer. As a freelance photographer, he documented the current conflict in Afghanistan. These distinct roles of a combat photographer all document the Australian soldier at war. Over a 20-year time period, Ramage has documented conflicts in Somalia, Bougainville, Bosnia, Kosovo, East Timor, Iraq and Afghanistan. The majority of collection is held by the Australian War Memorial in print and digital media, but to date has remained mostly unexamined or not displayed. An initial examination of the collection raises many questions about the visual culture of war and the politics, conflicts and compromises inherent in its documentation. Does having a military background help or hinder the photographer when capturing the image of war? How does the agenda of the employer affect the end result, and does it create barriers for the photographer and the subject? What is the impact of war and conflict on the combat photographer when capturing the last moments of a person's life? Ultimately, do you choose to take that picture? Based on an oral history conducted with the Australian War Memorial in 2014 and his 2016 biography written with Mark Abernethy, The Shot, this presentation will critically examine a selection of Ramage's work to explore these questions further. In wars where nothing seems to matter, I can take pictures where every person counts. Gary Ramage, 2016. In Susan Sontag's book, Regarding the Pain of Others, she states, "The understanding of war among people who have not experienced war is now chiefly a product of the impact of these images." This quote from Sontag is highly applicable to the war photographs taken by Gary Ramage. These images are the reality of current conflict to the public. The images are emotive and tell many different stories of Australia's defence personnel in conflict. His experience as a photographer has taken him from the intelligence cell of 6 RAR, where he first used a camera within the military, through to public relations unit, where he reached the role of chief photographer. Ramage left the army after 17 years and continued his career in photography. As a civilian, he travelled to Afghanistan twice, the first as a war correspondent with News Limited, and the second trip Ramage self-funded and embedded with the Australian and United States militaries. As a soldier, the image that Ramage produced while in the military was shaped by defence. His News Limited images were influenced by that media body. Finally, when self-embedding, he got to set his own agenda. My paper today is going to examine his work from Somalia and Afghanistan. Ramage was born in Scotland in 1967 and immigrated with his family to Australia in 1975. One of his earliest memories is of his father carrying a camera bag on all of the family outings. This camera was a Super 8 Cine, and that camera became part of everything, Ramage states. Dad shot the film and those reels formed the record of our family. It was a normal part of life, and it was also considered normal that I, and later my 2 sisters, could point, focus and shoot on that camera. This upbringing sowed the seeds for Ramage's future career as a photographer and the importance of telling and recording stories through image. Ramage enlisted in the Australian Army at age 17 and spent his first 5 years with 6 RAR. These years were essential to understanding military life and the machine that is defence. He learnt the importance and skill of stripping down a weapon to be self-sufficient in the field, a skill that would later pay off in his photographic career. While serving with 6 RAR, he was accepted into the intelligence section of the battalion and was sent to the Army School of Military Survey, where he was sent on a comprehensive photographic course at Albury-Wodonga. This course was extensive and covered the wet process, which was favoured in those days for its portability and quick production in the field, as well as black and white film, colour negative film and colour transparency film. This background was vital to Ramage, as photographers in the field can't afford to have gaps in their abilities. It was after this course that Ramage was then seconded to the Public Affairs Unit. Ramage's first deployment with the Public Relations Unit was Somalia in 1993 with Operation Solace, which was part of the Unified Task Force Somalia, UNITAF. UNITAF has been considered part of the largest state building initiative in Somalia, serving primarily to secure the distribution of humanitarian aid. This photograph is poignant on a number of levels. First and foremost, it displays what the Australian Defence Force was in Africa to do, ensuring food was distributed safely to bring an end to the Somali famine. Here we see a frail in stature Somali woman with a robust Australian soldier standing next to her, holding food for her family to survive. He is smiling, healthy, and is in stark contrast to the woman he is helping. Ramage always tried to build a rapport with the subject of his images, and then struck up a conversation with Lance Corporal Shannon McIlhenny before he took this photograph in March 1993. The last photograph of McIlhenny alive. Ramage was aged 24, McIlhenny was 21. On the 2nd of April 1993, McIlhenny was accidentally killed on patrol, a month after Ramage had taken this photograph. He was the third Australian soldier to die on deployment since the Vietnam War. Ramage obviously did not know he was going to be the photographer to capture the last image of McIlhenny alive, nor did he know he was going to be the photographer assigned to take the post-mortem photographs. Ramage discusses this experience in an oral history conducted by Senior Curator Stephanie Boyle at the Australian War Memorial on the 25th of August 2017. And this clip goes for approximately 5 minutes. And just a warning, this clip is quite abstract, and it's the abstract is quite graphic. So just be prepared.
And we had the death of Shannon McIlhenny as well, which sort of stuck with me for a long, long time, because I'd worked closely with the medics and the doctors and whatever else. When the incident happened, they rang me straight away. So I was quite lucky in a sense that I was down, set up. I remember it clear as day. I went down from my little bunker where the caravan was, the dark room, down the road to the hospital, which is an old hangar, and they had two big Green Army hospital tents set up. And I went around the back, set up my legs on for the tripod for the big video camera, the NG camera I had, put the camera on the tripod, and then we heard all the fuss as the APCs came in. And then we heard all the screaming and yelling and whatever else. And then they brought, I don't know who it was or what was going on, but then they brought, Shannon in. We didn't know it was him at the time. And, he was in a lot of pain because he'd been shot. And the CO, Dave Hurley, was there in the RSM, and I can't remember the RSM's name, but both of them were standing beside me when I had the camera. And for whatever reason, I just took the camera off the tripod and put it on the ground and just stood there with the two of them, didn't film or record anything. Whereas now, and I've done it, I would have recorded it. But wearing the uniform and be part of the group and everything else, if I had tried to do something, I would have done it as well. I would have probably just knocked the lights out. Because do you want me to talk about this?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, okay. So when Shannon got brought in, and I can't remember the name of the doctor, but the doctor was sort of here, and all the medics were around him. And everyone's sort of, trying to calm him down. And he was screaming his head off, he didn't want to die and he wanted his mum. It was pretty sort of emotional stuff. And you could hear the rest of the section out of the tent. I think they're on the other side of the tent. And they were all in tears. They're all like, grown men, like bawling their eyes out. And after a couple of minutes, I think the doctor just looked up and said, okay, that's it, everybody out. So everyone around him left. And as they were walking out, I think Dave Hurley and RSM sort of looked to me and I looked to them, and I think I grabbed my tripod, my camera, I can't remember, but as I walked out, I must have, because as I walked out, I remember all the boys were sitting on the left and they were all just inconsolable, they're all crying their eyes out. And then as I walked out, it started to rain, and I remember just walking back to my bunker in the pouring rain, carrying my tripod and the camera, whatever else in his hand, got down to my bunker, and we're in an old airfield, and where we'd put the mobile caravan, there was like these mounds of dirt. So it was like these sort of bunkers, that they sort of semi-bunkers with no covering, and it was like these three-sided mound. So the caravan we'd reversed in, it had a mound here and a mound here and a mound here. And when we'd first set up, we'd gone up and put the generators at the top of the back mound, and that's where we used to run the power from. I just went up there, and I sat there in the pouring rain and just started crying my eyes out. Why, I don't know to this day, but I was obviously upset. And then I remember the public affairs officer, Dave Taylor, who was a major, then came up and sort of said, "Oh, what's going on? Are you all right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And then he said, "Okay, well, we want you to go down to the battalion headquarters, and the CO, the battalion's asked you to go and do the mortuary pictures of Shannon, because Shannon obviously had died." I was like, "Yep, okay, no worries," because there was no one else there to do it, so it was more or less just suck it up, and off we went. And I went down to the Q store, which was an old building, must have been about 1 kilometre or 2 away from where I was, and I don't know how I got there. I can't remember how I got there. I must have driven. And we rocked up, and there was only 2 air-conditioned places in the whole area. One was my caravan, and the other was the Q store. So we got down to where Shannon was, and when we walked into this little room, there was a wall here, and he was laid out in a body bag that was open. He was totally naked, and the round had sort of gone in, I think, around here and come out up near his left shoulder. And they wanted all these mortuary pictures for the investigation. So it was purely, it wasn't me trying to be morbid or whatever else. It was, the task was, we need these pictures to figure out what happened. So I remember we had to actually straddle Shannon, sort of over the top of him, and get pretty close to where the wound was. But the whole time he was looking straight at me, because his eyes had opened. And what I didn't understand, because this affected me for a long time, what I didn't actually understand was, when the body, after death, body relaxes, even though you close the eyes, everything else just sort of opens up again. And I never had the courage to actually reach down and close his eyes. So for many years afterwards, I'd always wake up with these nightmares, and Shannon was looking straight through me. And then after that job was done, I think we just zipped him up and off we went. That was it.
During this interview, Ramage is pragmatic about his experience of McIlhenny's death and his experience of taking the post-mortem photographs, recalling his memory 23 years post-experience. In his biography, The Shot, he discusses this event and states, "The episode struck with me for years, giving me nightmares. The problem with being a photographer is that you are paid to see things. You open up your eyes and you see them all. And then you can't unsee it. And so it was with Shannon's death. The photographer who goes out looking for action, he should be careful what he wishes for." However, he now states that if he had to go through that again, he would record the events surrounding McIlhenny's death. I believe this is due to the fact that he is no longer with the military, he's not in that close circle of the defence family, and he's finally able to distance himself from it. Ramage was also present at the last post ceremony commemorating the service of McIlhenny at the Australian War Memorial on the 13th of June 2014. The ceremony was presented by then Chief of Army General David Hurley, who was also the commanding officer for Operation Solace. The photograph used at this ceremony was the one Ramage had taken in 1993 of McIlhenny with a Somali woman. And now here it is again in 2014 with his mother, Liz Hands, and the then Chief of Army, General David Hurley, now Governor-General. Ramage was at this ceremony and got to speak with Liz, and I believe this would have given him some sort of closure. He has been able to see firsthand the importance of his work, not only in regards as a military record of Operation Solace, but also as the last photograph Liz will have of her son alive. In 2009, the ADF invited 3 media professionals who had experience in conflict zones for a trial embed in Afghanistan for 2 weeks. They were Ian McPhedran, Sally Sarah and Gary Ramage. The first week of the embed, Ramage was able to leverage off his military contacts and embed with the US Army's 10th Mounted Division in Logar Province, the mission being to establish new patrol bases and dominate an area which had fallen under Taliban control. While embedded with the division, the divide between the troops and the media was made clear. As media, the dress regulation in a combat zone is to wear all blue, to distinguish media from the combatants. This raises a number of issues both for the photographer and the unit in which they are embedded with. The reason being you stand out, especially on patrol, to the insurgents. Ramage states, "The 10th actually woke me up to the soldier-media divide, and once I'd seen it from the military perspective, I couldn't go back. When a non-state actor, usually of the guerrilla, rebel or terrorist variety, see a person in blue, they see a chance for maximum publicity. A captured or killed journalist is big news and gives these peddlers of violence the attention they need. So to see it from a soldier's viewpoint, you're travelling through hostile territory, and on a normal day the snipers and shooters might let you pass because they feel outnumbered. But if they see a blue helmet and a blue ballistic vest, they will force the issue because the journalist is seen as a VIP, not as a soldier." Ramage was instructed to paint his blue shirt green and was promptly handed 2 spray cans of drab olive green paint by the sergeant of the 10th Mounted Division, and basically that was the end of discussion. It was also interesting to note that it's against Geneva Convention for an accredited press person to carry a firearm, concealed or otherwise. This means when travelling in a patrol, Ramage could easily be seen by the troops as a liability, not as someone who was there to promote the cause of the military. Following this embed with the 10th Mounted Division, Ramage embedded with 1RAR, reuniting with fellow journalists Ian McPhedran and Sally Sarah. It was during this embed where the 3 journalists experienced an attack from the Taliban. They recorded the attack and had the story written up and images sent to Sydney within the hour. Due to this fast turnaround, the commanding officer of 1RAR stated to Ramage they had given the Taliban the heads up about high-value targets, journalists, and the enemy would now try harder to hit the base. The embed had failed from the viewpoint of the army. In 2011, Ramage returned to Afghanistan with a self-embed. He paid his own way and took holidays to carry this out, with Charlie Company, 2nd Royal Australian Regiment, for 2 weeks. He was at the US Special Forces base called Forward Operating Base Tinsley, which was located in Uruzgan Province, southern Afghanistan. He produced 22 images from this embed for his exhibition titled Diggers in Afghanistan, and the memorial purchased all 22 for the National Collection. This photograph depicts members of Mentoring Task Force 3 in action after coming into contact with the Taliban fighters at Doan. Combat Team Charlie was conducting a broader clearance of the area in a 3-day partner patrol with the Afghan National Army when they came under fire. The firefight lasted several hours, during which time 1 Australian soldier was injured when his Bushmaster vehicle was damaged by an improvised explosive device. These photographs are diverse as not only do they depict the high level of stress on patrol, but also the quieter time of a soldier's life when deployed on operations. Ramage states, "I wanted to capture the downtime, what the boys would do before and after patrol. The camera Ramage used for these images was his Hasselblad, a manual camera, to take these photographs, which produced a 6x6 square negative. And using his Hasselblad, Ramage has gone back to the beginning of his career, and this is the camera he first trained on, and that camera is now part of the National Collection here at the Memorial." He states, "I enjoy using it as it slows me down and makes me think harder about the exposure and the composition of the photograph. These images can align themselves with the Australian photographer Frank Hurley, who was one of Ramage's inspirations." Ramage commented on these images with an interview with Henry Zwartz on March 2017. "I'm not a philosopher, I am a photographer. I do not attempt to force my views on people. What I hope is that through my photography, I can show the public what these men and women do in our name. It is always a challenge to get the message out there, but in this series, Diggers in Afghanistan shows another side to war. I have many photographs of pain, suffering, misery and death, but in this series, I hope to show the lighter side of war. I believe in these 22 images, he has captured what he set out to do. The trust of the subject is there and is apparent," Ramage states. "I think it has been helped being a former soldier, Being with the guys on the ground, they seem to relax and be very comfortable with me in their presence, which is great because it frees me up to earn their trust and to get closer to them, which gives me better access and better photographs for people back home to see what those boys are doing out there. Many of these images express the vulnerability of these soldiers and the harshness of the environment they are living in and fighting in. As my paper has discussed, the trust of the photographer has to be there with the military for these images to be taken. Ramage has achieved this, and now these images are the living memory of current conflict. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
You referred to Frank Hurley as being an influence. Do you have any sense of whether he sees more Frank Hurley, World War I Frank Hurley versus, or compared with World War II Frank Hurley?
To me, looking at Ramage's images, especially these 22, definitely World War II and Tobruk springs to mind. Yeah. Yes.
Thanks, Ally. The photographs are incredibly beautiful. Going back to the photograph of Shannon, the Somali woman, when I look at that woman, I can see that she's in a more vulnerable position to the Australian soldier, to Shannon, but also I think of that woman as possibly being very strong and having perhaps given birth to children in difficult situations, raising grandchildren perhaps. And I wondered, do we know anything about her? Do we know her name or the family or any of those?
Unfortunately not. Gary hasn't spoken about her, but that is something that I can follow up definitely because that would give great context. Yeah.
Thanks, Ally. That was great. I'm just interested whether he has spoken about working for a media organisation like News Limited in that first embed that he was in Afghanistan. You spoke about how the US military impacted on his behaviour there by painting his vest and such. But has he spoken about whether had the brief from News Limited impacted on his photography?
Not really, no. To me, when I look at the images that he produced during that time, it was very much, as you can see the photograph, when I was speaking about how he had such a quick turnaround of what was actually going on there, that it had created a telling the truth about war and what was actually going on with the IEDs and the attacks and all that sort of stuff. So I think in that regard, it's very much an area of looking at photographs in terms of what Australia's role was over there. And I think that's what he had in mind when he was working with News Limited. Yeah. Yes, John.
With his father using a cine camera all the time,
Yep.
and him growing up with cine, did he shoot cine as well?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And he's actually quite a good videographer as well. So he did a lot of movies as well, which we've got in the collection of it.
Afghanistan?
Yes, yes. And to those who you don't know, this person here is actually a Director of Public Relations photographer. This is John Fairley, who was a Director of Public Relations in Vietnam. So I'm very honoured that he is here. Thank you. Yes.
Are there any plans to put all the photos that you said you had on display, even just electronically? So, for people who were in Somalia, there weren't a lot of digital cameras around then, so they don't have a lot of photos, and if Gary has all that form, has such a big collection, is there any plans to display them at all?
We'll have to talk to exhibitions about that. As you know, with the upcoming galleries, there is a huge opportunity in that area, especially in regards to peacekeeping. So that's something we'll definitely be looking into.
Ali, you can look at a lot of them in the Middle Eastern section on that screen that you push his name and the other photographers.
Excellent.
There's a lot of his photos there.
Excellent. And that's really good. And also with those new galleries, hopefully they will all be online as well. And I'd just like to make one more thank you while I have this opportunity. My dad is here today. So thanks for coming, Dad. Thank you.